provisional teachings to deliver all beings. In each of us, carefully contemplate all conditioned phenomena and the karmic law of cause and effect. So today, obviously, Master has been mentioned a lot about contemplation, and this contemplation is very important because we have our other 5 roots and in contact with the externality of condition. So unless we contemplate, sometimes we get consumed by the conditions when we are in. So therefore, we need to understand what the condition means to us. Sometimes things which are trying, things which are difficult, are not necessarily bad. Sometimes things which are very good condition may not be necessarily good. So we need to understand that. So walk the same great body path and delve deeply into the Sutra treasury. And this is arising the contemplation, because when we do understand and apply the Dharma and understand this conditioned phenomena, then we know how profound and the teachings are. And this is arising from your experiential learning. So this experiential learning, when you delve deeply into it, we have to then give rise to what the sutra that you have learned means in your experience in life. And this requires, again, go back to contemplation. So journey on the great vows to go amongst the people. And this is obviously the great one vehicle that we are in. And this is your aspirational vows, right? Among the people, in fact, this is your first vow. So forever remain in a state of non-retreating to attain the 6 parameters. You see, these 6 parameters, when it's perfected, 6 parameters are 6 perfection, right? And or perfection of wisdom, or prajna parameter. And the non-retreating, this must be perfected. So obviously one is perfected and never be retreating. And these 6 parameters is necessary if we want to progress on the grounds of bodhisattvahood. And beyond then the 6 parameters, then is another form arising from that. So in Master's explanation, everyone in learning the Buddha's way, we must learn to always carefully contemplate and be vigilant and mindful. Like have to contemplate, be vigilant and mindful. So we talked about contemplation earlier. What do you mean by we should say vigilant and mindful? Again, this one here refers to spiritual consciousness. So in the spiritual consciousness, when we live our daily life and go through the experiential learning, and as I mentioned earlier, these conditions will arise. So therefore, we need to understand. So if we take the to be in practice, and we practice well and understand the conditions well, the so-called bad condition, the so-called good condition, and you walk with equanimity, it is actually neither good or bad. Okay, I know it's a bit difficult to understand, and if you get into the practice, then you really realize this condition is just another condition. So we must always be careful of the way we interact with people and deal with matters. And as I mentioned, this is about the consciousness. And why is it that we need to be careful with the way we interact with people? Because this is about our character. This is about interaction with the external condition. There's so much on condition that arises, but people are also part of that. So when we practice that, when we understand who we are and we apply the Dharma, we interact with the people, we are actually practicing outside in. Okay, so and I'm in contact with the condition, in contact with the people, matters and objects, and that will come back to us from what we see from outside to inside. So it's outside in, and the development of the character. But this character cannot be developed without first developing our consciousness, because if we don't do that, we'll be still stuck in the sixth consciousness. Okay, and with the sixth consciousness, we will react what we think is right, and that is the manifestation of our thoughts, manifestation of our mind, manifestation of the intellectual capability of the mind, and not the spiritual wisdom. So because all things in this world are considered conditioned phenomena, and we are all ordinary people, we are unable to penetrate the unconditioned Dharma. It's because we get consumed by this conditioned phenomena. So unconditioned Dharma consists of true principles, and that's what it is. So just what I just explained earlier, this is what we're trying to do. Then unconditioned Dharma and consists of the true principle, applying these true principles. And these true principles can only be realized when you understand what this conditioned phenomena is and be able to distinguish it. So however we now want, if we now want to earnestly engage in spiritual practice, we must begin with the conditioned phenomena. And we have to, because remember the 12 cyclings of causation. So in the 12 links of causation, it says that when the six roots develop in contact with the external condition. So this is part of life. So it's from the conditioned phenomena that we first of all, we learn the Dhamma. In the conditioned phenomena, begin experiential learning. So then when we understand that, when we are in a state of equanimity, only then we can advance to the unconditioned Dharma and be united with the true principles. And so it's no longer abide to what one likes, to things which are near, or someone is very averse to what is from the far. So there's no longer any hatred, no longer there be any attachment of love with things or with people. So before we attain Buddhahood, we must first form good affinity with people. But good affinity with people, because this is where you cannot have good affinity with people unless you have this character. You cannot have this character unless you have this consciousness. Okay, so we need to understand this. And so this good affinities arises from the progress of cultivation and learning, and until the reach the stage of being forgiving. Because otherwise, if one is not merciful or forgiving, one will be afflicted by rage of anger. And this often happens when one is very sensitive. So every single move we make is part of the Sutra treasury. And we just look at it, which is quite true, is it not? Because the condition that arises, how we react, how we talk, how we act in ways to and react to things that arises. So whatever we do, right or wrong, every single move we make is subject to karmic law of cause and effect. So we've got to be mindful. You need to be mindful, because one unwholesome act can result in innumerable ripples. That some things that we say, we upset somebody, somebody you upset will take it on their wife or the spouse or the children, and then on whoever they interact with. So that's why there's a lot of ripple effect, and we got to be very careful and be very mindful with this. So we have formed aspiration to enter the great vehicle Dharma, or one reality, although I would rather use the word of one truth, but that's what the transcript says. We are journeying on the great vows to go among the people, the training ground for bodhisattvas. So this great vow that we undertake, and this is what that will always be reminding us when we walk the path and in this life and life after life, because this is great vows. So we need them to understand that even the first vow that we undertake, right? is to help deliver all sentient beings, or help to liberate all sentient beings. So that is for the sake, so our practice, our cultivation, our spiritual program is for the sake of others. So if the sake for others, then why are we so attached to our way of doing things, for example? Right? So these are the training ground for bodhisattvas. So this about the, when I saw this about the insights and, sorry, let me go back, about the 3 insights and the 6 spiritual powers. I will come to it, expand a bit later. So the 3 insights, 3 insights are known as 3 insights to the arahats, but for the Buddha, there are 3 understanding. Okay, insight in the previous life, insight of heavenly eyes, insight of ending all leaks. So you all understand all this, right? We all shared earlier this morning. It's okay. In your spiritual journey, have you ever come across people with this spiritual insights? Well, I have, and some of them they attain it through, obviously, through their meditation. I'll be able to see that. Obviously, people with heavenly eyes is recognizing the future suffering. And so this insight means we can recognize the past suffering, recognize the future suffering, and then therefore ending all this. So it's a very logical flow, and we need to understand the past suffering, otherwise we will never correct ourselves, which is the reason why I often mention to you all, reflect upon yourself, because it's that reflection. It's about what you have done, which is obviously we're not able to know what our previous lives are. We know what we have done the past moment, we know what we've done yesterday, we know what we've done last year, and what we have done through the years. So this is the reflection. Okay, then when we do that, then we have, and especially when you go amongst the masses, you will know how things will manifest, that cause will manifest in the future, and this recognizing of the future suffering. And so doing, and this is ending all leaks, and this is where you go inside, that you have to do in your proper contemplation. And you know that you are, because of all this suffering, you would understand what these causes are and why it shouldn't be done. Okay, and that's when we get applying that into a proper practice, so that the raging skandhas doesn't afflict us. So the 6 spiritual powers, the power of the heavenly eye, able to see all things in the 6 realms, among the various appearances in the world without any hindrances. So these 6 spiritual powers are consequence of the spiritual progress, and it will come. So the heavenly ear, able to hear all things in the 6th realm, the suffering and so on. I'll come to some of this later. The power of knowing others' minds, be able to understand all things in the 6th realms think, and basically be able to read your mind, so to speak. And the power of knowing past lives, power of transporting oneself, and power ending all leaks, which I just explained. So the power of actually knowing, or if I could use the word, being clairvoyant as a result, is the natural progress. You can see what's happening. I'm sure you will also hear Master has have, on occasion able to demonstrate, but obviously, is it one who is in true practice will never show the power, but you will know that they do have. Okay, so and you have the affinity, then you'll really be able to so-called experience that. But It's also very, very important that when you attain this, which I'm sure in one day and one lifetime you will, we must not indulge in this, okay? Because I'm sure you also come across people who has this power. They do indulge in it, so they go into what you call that, so-called fortune telling, or telling what things are. Because we must understand karma will manifest, okay, the way it will. And if you disrupt the flow of karma, you are actually throwing another pebble into the pieces of someone's life, and there will be a rebound. Okay, so that's the reason why, even though high beings or spiritual attained beings, and those who are even a true practice will never do indulge in this, but obviously knowing things will happen, they will advise you why you shouldn't do things, but it's up to you to listen. So, and if one doesn't have that inner ear to listen to what is being said by someone higher up, would then ignore that. Okay, so one, even though one has so-called a spiritual affinity or spiritual fortune, to be able to be advised by someone, and that when advice is not taken, obviously then someone will then listen with a worldly mind and continue the way things are being done. So the lessons learned. The Buddha wanted everyone to recognize suffering so that we engage in spiritual practice. He had to find ways to review and explain so that sentient beings would find joy in the Buddha Dharma, seek and engage in spiritual practice, and they were able to transcend the world. Now, Buddha wanted everyone to recognize suffering. They find ways to review and explain to the sentient beings so they find joy in the Buddha Dharma. Now, yesterday, which I didn't have time to explain, you remember how the Brahman had an offering for a small cloth, and then he got the prediction from the Buddha. Now, all that's the simple act, and people then get attached that only offering such a humble thing, I can get a prediction to become a Buddha because I offered to the Buddha. So therefore, I must get a bigger cloth. I must get a more expensive gift and offer to the Buddha. So this is the intellectual understanding of the mind, because it's a logical thing to do, right? So in the material world, the more I offer you, the happier you will be. But the spirit at a spiritual level, you know that is not so much of the following what's being offered, but what is the condition and what arises from that intention of that offering, and the sincere offering that is important. So therefore, those lessons that Master always tell us, they're very simple stories, but they're very profound lessons to be learned from all this. So this sincerity that have been being brought up, but then one can say, oh, I'm also sincere too. Of course, it's sincere too, but we must also understand the sincerity of one who is a higher level of practice, and sincerity of one which is the lower practice. So there are so many variable factors in this, and offering in itself is a huge topic to share. But what I'm trying to explain to you is that there's a reason why we got to dive very deeply into the teaching. That's why we need to contemplate. That's why the Buddha said, find many ways to review and explain. It's not so simple. But the problem is because of our worldly consciousness, we indulge in it. And that's where the great hindrance is going to be. So even one can be indulging in spiritual attainments. So we must forever remain in a state of non-retreating to attain the 6 parameters. Why mean non-retreating? Just explain about the spiritual power. So when the progress, one may get when endowed in a spiritual power, and that can lead do a deviant practice is one careful. And this is a side shows in life. We will get attracted by these attainments. So sentient beings are stubborn, and so are we. How can we then subdue our stubbornness? So this is why we must work hard and engage in spiritual practice. Only by taming our afflictions and ignorance will we be able to help other beings to tame our ignorance. So much that we can progress. There are our own ways of things, how we like things to be done, things that I would like to say. So we got to understand ourselves, tame our own affliction, and the affliction can only be tamed if you are able to tame your mind. You can only tame your mind only when you are able to tame your ego. If you're now we are this life that we have, okay, we have a mind, okay, we have to live with it, number one. Number two is that we have an ego and we have to live with it. The question is, how are you going to deal with that ego? How are you going to subdue that ego? You cannot eliminate your ego, but the best you can do is to subdue that ego. So we must go among people so that we can test each other's spiritual practice. So, and every one of us whom we meet, they are our teachers. We get tested all the time, especially your spouse that will test you. So we must not allow sentient beings of affliction to affect our result. Only in this way can we attain the 6 parameters, right? Which is generosity, morality, patience, perseverance, meditation, and wisdom. Okay. So, and if you recall, the 3 flawless studies, right? Precepts, samadhi, and wisdom, which is why I bold them here just to remind you all. And the 3 flawless studies in the 6 parameters. So the patient, the ability to enjoy and accept all conditions, adverse and favorable, good and evil, with unshakable peace of mind. So this is what patient, when I want to hold on to patient, and this is one that a lot of people find it very difficult. And you know, I think my home sister will tell you I'm not a very patient person, but I can tell you she was my greatest teacher on patience. I used to pick her up after work, and I wanted to make sure that she's on time. I don't waste time waiting in the car. But almost that doesn't happen. So she had trained me well in this. So with our mind, with other people, when other people compliment us, we can become self-important. And this is also another affliction. So that gives rise to pride. We are proud. Okay, our ego arises. When we are happy, Maras may be tempting us to follow them. And this is also important to understand because you won't have own Maras, I must have said. So all these attainments and this about the workings of our ego. So contemplation. Raising the questions in your heart is like using tools to unearth the universal truth. What do you mean by raising questions in your heart? So when we listen to the Dharma, we listen with our heart. When we listen to our heart, with our heart, that is what you sincerely take in the Dharma. But each time when you go into the contemplative listening, questions will arise in your heart, and you'll be surprised that the meaning that unfolds from a simple teaching is multifaceted, and then it will unfold and expand to a lot of other teachings. And so that's why it is like a tool to unearth the universal truth when you do that. Much like showers are needed to dig the earth and mixers are needed to churn the cement to build a house. So the universal truth is always there for you to uncover. And it's all, why is it always there to uncover? Because the true suchness is in your intrinsic nature. So that's the reason why what is this showers that we need to dig are all the incrustations you accumulated in the past. Arise the questions in your heart to dig into the insightful knowledge to unearth the inner knowing of the Dharma. And this is what, that's the reason why when the Buddha gave the teachings, and all the masters do that, they allow you to ask questions. Okay, so when I had the very fortunate time to meet up with a master, which is the carving range in 2017, before I started my Jiangxi. Master allow everyone to ask the question. So obviously, being an inquisitive person, I asked the question. So, and that's what it is. So you got to bring up these questions in your heart all the time. Relationship affinity does not come from one's blessing, but from one's action. And Master always emphasize on a special good affinity, because that's how we will progress. So we do not want to come back in our next life with a lot of people coming after us because of the bad affinity we create this lifetime. They will disrupt and derail your spiritual progress. The affinity arose from an action of the past, right, that we have in this life, or it could be in the present that we are cultivating in this life, and people are grateful for what you have done, there are so many stories that the sisters and brothers have shared on the CBI work they have done. So if one thinks there is no affinity, establish the affinity in this life then. Okay. All right, Gan En, brothers and sisters, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much to our brother Chin for another round of marvelous sharing, great insight, and also thank you to Sister Siu Ping for trading